Part 3, here we go. If you haven't seen the first two parts, then go watch those before you watch this. I gotta say, it's rough trying to revisit some of these games because I haven't thought about them in so long. I mean, why would I? These all suck ass. Hope I don't drag out my reviews in this part, but I think I went a little bit overboard with some of them. I'm just trying to get my point across, you know? I need to learn how to spark notes my writing, but oh well. But let's continue down the list of really shitty games I've played. Oh boy. So I got a comment in the last part giving me a list of games that I could potentially use for this list. I appreciate that because I'm having a hard time remembering some really bad ones. One of them caught my eye because I did play it somewhat recently. Mythmaker's SuperCard GP is the one that stuck out and reeks of lazy cash grab. Data Design is back at it with their low-effort shovelware, this time in the form of a really shitty racer. How about we go down the checklist of the DDI crap? Lazy graphics? Check. Reusing assets? Check. Obnoxious music? Check. Badly implemented motion controls that barely work? Check-a-rooney. You know, at first I didn't mind the motion controls for steering because the tracks seemed to be built around them, but then I played the more involved tracks. The controls are really bad because you just can't make most turns. You barely turn at all. The tracks themselves are pretty basic, but not awful. What is awful is that they reuse the same few tracks with slight differences like mirroring them or changing the weather. The AI is ridiculous too. They all follow each other in a straight line like ants. The only thing I liked in this game was the item system. If you're holding onto an item and grab another box, it'll upgrade that weapon. It kind of reminds me of Mod Nation Racers. A much better racing game that I think everybody should play if they have a PlayStation 3. That game kicks ass. Oh geez. Plumbers Don't Wear Ties has to be one of the laziest video games ever made. The game follows Jane and John, who are being pestered by their parents to pop their cherries and make some babies. You have choices on how you want the story to progress, and the outcome is always something ridiculous. It probably could have worked as a cheesy FMV game, but the whole game is being portrayed in a bunch of still images of the characters. PowerPoint presentations have more motion than this game. Sometimes the photos will have really strange filters or just random as fuck characters show up to ruin the already not entertaining story. The amount of unfunny puns and sex jokes is almost as annoying as box office bust. This game was made for the 3DO, which was totally capable of having full motion video. The intro movie is a video, so how come the rest of the game isn't one too? I guess we'll never know.
Take your damn clothes off!
I wanted to like Dead Rising 4, but man, I really couldn't get into it. Dead Rising isn't my favorite series of games, but I still really enjoyed playing through them. The fourth game is the latest and probably the last in the series. This game was the final nail in the coffin for this franchise. But why? Well, let's start with the story. It's nothing groundbreaking. Basically another zombie virus broke out and Frank West is back with his student Vic to try and stop it and find the cause of all of it. All of the characters in this game are either jerks, annoying, or boring. Frank is the worst offender here because they completely changed his character. He's not even Frank West anymore. They turned him into a middle-aged man telling really unfunny jokes and acting like a complete dick to everybody. It's really obnoxious and worst of all, not entertaining. The gameplay was also completely stripped down. Sure, you have the basics of a large map and a bunch of zombies to mow down, but that's it. With the exception of the mall, most of the environment is just not that fun to explore. You have an incentive, but also no incentive to explore. See, the other Dead Rising games were timed. Certain events had certain intervals. If you failed to show up for them, they would disappear, or in the case of main quests, your game was over. The high stakes of the previous games are gone, so you can freely explore, which is nice, but the overworld is so bland. The only interesting thing to find are blueprints for combo weapons, which are really lacking in this game. Especially because the zombies are more lifeless than in previous games, for a lack of better words. It's not satisfying to mow down hundreds of zombies in this game. Dead Rising 3 did it right, I feel. The only side missions you can get are mainly Maniac missions, which replace the psychopaths from previous games. Maniac fights are just lazy. It's essentially just a buffed up survivor with more health. They have no personality or character to them at all. You can rarely find other overworld missions. I must have explored this whole place, and I only found like 4 missions you could do. They're no fun either. The ending really sucks too. Only one possible ending compared to the other games which had multiple endings. The post-game story was $10 DLC. Fuck off, really? I will say they did improve the game with updates, but it still isn't enough to save this game. The Capcom Heroes mode is the only part I actually enjoyed in this game. Oh, and they also removed 2-player co-op for the campaign, which I don't know why they did that. That was probably like one of the most fun parts of the previous 2 games, so this game really has nothing going for it. This is why Nintendo has a close grasp on their IPs. If they didn't, they would end up with the Zelda CDI games. I'm counting all 3 of them because they all equally suck. Wand of Gamelon and the Faces of Evil are almost identical games, so let's start with those 2 first. First off, the cutscenes. They're goofy and horrible, but great for YouTube poops in the early days of the site. Second, the controls are awful. It's a side-scroller where you have to press up to jump. For a platforming game where precision is key, this is not acceptable. You have a button for your sword, and then you have one button for literally everything else. Using items, opening doors, talking to people. There's a third button on the controller. Why can't they just use that for most of this shit? You'll accidentally do things you don't want to do because it's all mapped to a single button. The gameplay is rough because the enemies are so high in numbers and you don't have post-hit recovery, so you'll die constantly. Picking up rubies, not rupees, is a chore because you need to stab them with your sword to collect them. The only positive to these games are the graphics, not the cutscenes, and the music is pretty catchy. Without rambling on for too long, let's get the third game out of the way. It's a top-down game much like the first Zelda game, but with digitized sprites. Everything you would expect to suck, sucks. The graphics are ugly, the controls are unresponsive, loading to each screen takes forever, the menu is slow, the maps are useless, etc. This is probably the worst one out of the 3 just because it's more jank, and it doesn't have those funny, poorly made cutscenes either. How dare they? So this game was apparently just supposed to be a tech demo to test the creator's basic compiler and sound driver, but for some reason it was released on the Sega Genesis in 2004. Crazy Bus is not a game. I don't even need to tell you why it sucks. Look at it. All you do is pick a really crappy bus and drive it to the right, and honk the horn if you're feeling adventurous. All I really need to do is play the title music to prevent you from actually playing this game. How in the world did this get turned into a game for the Sega Genesis? A console, at that point, has been discontinued for about 7 years. I couldn't tell you. Games that are classified as clones get shit on a lot, like the original Saints Row games. But at least those games are good. Rough Trigger the Vanacore Conspiracy is a shitty clone of Ratchet & Clank. I say shitty because it's basically just Ratchet & Clank, but give it to the shitheads that made Ninja Breadman. They didn't make this game, but that's what it feels like. Everything, like the movement and firing weapons, all feels off. It's way too floaty and the impact of the weapons are so light it's like you're beating enemies with pool noodles. The plot of the game is just the same as in Ratchet & Clank Going Commando, with these creatures called piglots being sold as pets but are actually giant monsters in disguise. You even need to collect these things at certain points in certain levels. It's so tedious because you can only pick up one at a time and drop it in the portal, then go back and forth and back and forth. It's very repetitive. The characters all suck. They tried to portray them as being more badass than they are, but they're just lame and gay. Ruff is an absolute moron. Dude literally drinks some green shit he finds on the planet and transforms into a wolf monster. It has no impact on the plot. He can transform now, which is just better than his base form because you can jump better, move faster, and kill things easier. The level design is so boring and dark. They're all just shitty rip-offs of planets from Ratchet & Clank. The motorbike level can suck a fart. The graphics and cutscenes are all poor with really crappy acting to boot. Honestly, what was the point of this game? This game came out in 2006. By this point, there were already 4 Ratchet & Clank games for the PS2. And next year, in 2007, there would have been a Ratchet & Clank game for the PS3. This game is completely pointless and a waste of time. Holy shit. How in the fuck did a game like this get released to the public? Animal Soccer World is not a game. It's just a poorly animated movie put onto a disc. Okay, well there is a game here, but it's just a bunch of shitty minigames. Stuff like matching, jigsaw puzzles, and the worst ones of them all, slide puzzles. The main draw of this game is the movie, and it's truly the worst. The animation, horrible. Voice acting, horrible. Plot, dog shit. Characters, AIDS. Length, longer than it needs to be. I seriously can't sit through this whole thing. The acting is so poor, it's like the voice actors were on meth during the recording. And you know what? This isn't the only game like this. There are a few other games out there that are similar to this one with the same crappy minigames and poorly made movies. If you want to look them up for yourself, just check out Phoenix Games, the developers of this game. You'll find a goldmine of shit. So, I'm pretty sure this game was intentionally made to suck ass, much like Hong Kong 97, but I'm throwing it on here because it's still a sucky game. Stalin vs. Martians is a parody of real-time strategy games. I mean, come on, you play as Joseph Stalin, and you need to stop and kill a bunch of aliens. Even if it's meant to be a parody, they could have tried to make the game fun to play. A lot of the elements of normal RTS games are just not there. The game is very short, it's very glitchy and buggy, enemy placement and AI is pretty bad too. The game still has some positives. It's funny, until it's not anymore. And the soundtrack is actually pretty good. Check this one out if you're curious. Just don't expect a good game. Oh, another shitty fighting game. How many do we have so far? Like 5? Catfight seems like a good time from just the title alone, but once you actually start up the game, the good time implodes on itself. It's a traditional fighting game with digitized actors much like Mortal Kombat. Unlike Mortal Kombat, everything sucks. The controls are very unresponsive and the frame rate is really bad, meaning trying to pull off any move is going to be hard. On top of that, the hit detection barely registers and the AI barely fights back. So basically, you just mash buttons and hopefully you can win. The graphics and the sound are awful, it just sounds like two heavy smokers beating each other up. Trying this game out on modern PCs is impossible. The frame rate isn't capped, so the game will run way too fast, making it even more impossible to play. Or maybe it's better because that means you don't have to play through this game. I know I said no Steam indie trash worth 50 cents, but this one is special. The Slaughtering Grounds is an arena first-person shooter game where you go around 3 different maps shooting endless hordes of zombies. You can unlock new weapons and characters and such. Doesn't sound groundbreaking, but it could be entertaining, right? Well, first off, the zombies have pretty much no AI. They don't move at all until you're right in their face, and even though a majority of them look different, they all act the same way. The weapons aren't lined up properly with the crosshair, and some, like the assault rifles, are way too big and sway across the screen. The shotgun is the only good weapon because it kills everything in one hit compared to every other weapon, which can take multiple hits. Ammo pickups only count for the weapon you're holding, rather than giving you ammo for all guns. Doom figured this out in 1993. The level design is just a bunch of Unity assets placed throughout the map with no thought at all in the design. I literally couldn't walk through a door in one instance. The frame rate takes a dive when too many zombies spawn, and it's almost unbearable to play. If you don't kill the zombies, they will keep spawning. Taking damage has no indication, so you can just randomly wind up dead without realizing it. Honestly, you can complete this game without killing any zombies. They all spawn in fixed locations, so if you find a spot where they don't spawn near you, you could just sit there and run the timer down. You have infinite lives, so there's no challenge at all in this game. The music is just one song that plays on loop, and it's very annoying. Dude, honestly, I made a better zombie map in Little Big Planet 2 when I was 14. So another crappy Steam Greenlight game. What else is new? Well, the reason it's here is because of the developers. Much like Gary's Incident, Digital Homicide tried to silence critics from talking about how shit their game is, and probably hired people to give their games good reviews. But unlike the Gary's Incident developers, Digital Homicide actually tried to sue certain Steam users, and even YouTuber Jim Sterling, for $15 million. Of course, they didn't get shit, and Valve responded by kicking Digital Homicide off of Steam for good. This game, they tried to sue someone for $15 million for saying that this game was bad. Jeez, I wonder, what would happen if they actually made a good game and someone called it trash? I don't know. Once stated to be a Zelda ripoff, but actually released before Zelda 1, it's everyone's favorite shit NES game, Hydlide. Hydlide is an RPG that has aged like milk over the years. Give it a break for at least a little bit, it was one of the first action RPGs to hit Japan, and it's pretty primitive nowadays. Just because it's old though, doesn't mean it's any good. The gameplay is really bad. You need to hold down the A button in order to kill enemies by walking into them, which is very awkward to do. Changing from one screen to the next is so jittery and awful looking. You're forced to grind in this game because enemies will wreck your shit if you're underleveled. The game is directionless and you have no idea what you're supposed to be doing or what each item does. The save system only works for when you have the game on, so you're stuck using long passwords to load your game. The music is so annoying and is a complete rip-off of the Raiders of the Lost Ark theme. But the best part about this game has to be the protagonist's name. What's this brave knight's name? Jim. Jim the Knight. What a cool dude. This game just pisses me off to no end. Fester's Quest, from an outside perspective, doesn't seem like the worst thing ever. Sure, you got that classic NES trash of being way too hard and a severe lack of hit points, but if that was just it wouldn't bother me that much. Nah, dude. Everything else around this game is what makes it terrible. Let's start with Uncle Fester himself. He's slow as dirt and can only move in 4 directions. This game was made by Sunsoft, who also made Blaster Master, and in that game, the character can move diagonally. I really wish it was in this game because avoiding enemies would be way easier with it. Your weapon can be upgraded up to level 8, and you want to do this immediately. Not because it's the strongest, but you just have to because the other upgrades are awful. Upgrades 3 to 7 have such weird wavy patterns that trying to hit things with them is impossible. It also doesn't help that your bullets stop when they hit a wall, so narrow areas like the sewer, you're pretty much fucked. So like Hidelight, you need to grind on enemies to get power-ups, which takes an absurd amount of time. You want to avoid the gun downgrades as best as you can because finding more upgrades takes way longer than finding 50 downgrades. Also, when you die, you start back from the beginning of the game. Your progress is saved, sure, but walking back sucks ass. Add on the accidental downgrade pickups and slow speed, and it just isn't a fun time. The only positive to this game is the kick-ass music. But it's not enough to save this game from being shit. If you think Bubsy is annoying, then you clearly never met its obnoxious cousin, Awesome Possum. A Genesis exclusive, Awesome Possum is a side-scrolling mascot platformer, and his gimmick is that he's an environmentally friendly possum who beats up things that try to disrespect it. If that doesn't sound like a blast, then I don't know what would. The game itself is just bad. Awesome Possum himself is just annoying and won't shut up. He talks more than Bubsy and is less endearing to boot. The level design is ugly and not well done. The enemies take a while to kill and only move back and forth, really. The game is really choppy and has constant slowdown. The sound design is more obnoxious than Possum himself. Everything about shitty mascot platformers in the 90s is all inside of this game. Oh yeah, the full title of this game is Awesome Possum Kicks Dr. Machino's Butt. To give the game some credit, Possum does kick his butt at the end of the game, so, you know, that's pretty neat, I guess. Wow, I actually forgot about this game. Afro Samurai 2 was delisted so quick that it barely had enough time to sit down. You don't even play as Afro in this game, rather you play as Kuma. This game still feels like it was released in a beta state. The controls are bad, many glitches and other technical oddities. The sound effects are grating, the frame rate is poor, the AI sucks, the camera is very shaky, the combat is boring, the graphics are ugly, you get the picture. Basically, everything this game tries to do just falls flat on its face again and again. At least the developers realized that this game sucked so hard they allowed people to get refunds and completely delisted the game. The Xbox One version didn't even come out. That's how bad it was. At least the soundtrack is good. You can thank the RZA for that one. You know, I recently bought a Kinect for $20, and it's kind of neat and it sort of works. But let's be honest, most games made for this thing didn't work properly. Fighters Uncaged was one of the earliest games released for the Kinect, and everything negative that can be said about the Kinect applies to this game. No matter what move you try to pull off, it either doesn't work or something completely different will happen. Like sometimes doing a punch will cause the characters to do a kick. For the best results, just flail around like a dumbass and hopefully you knock down your opponent. There's no multiplayer and only one mode to play. The tutorial doesn't even help out much with the rest of the game. The graphics and voice acting are all pretty poor for 2010 standards, and you're better off just playing Wii Sports Boxing instead, which released 4 years prior. So last part I talked about Action 52, but did you know there was a sequel to the Cheetah Man game on the cartridge? Yes, Cheetah Man 2 was going to be that sequel and probably be priced normally instead of $200. I say was because this game technically wasn't released. They were found in a warehouse and have become a big collector's item. Other than that, the game itself is as dysfunctional as the entire library of Action 52 games. The mechanics of each stage isn't even similar to each other. Sometimes you have an infinite jump and sometimes you don't. Enemies spawn out the side of the screen and deal damage faster than you can react to it. The cheetah with the crossbow is absolute garbage. You can't hit shit with it. The glitches and graphical hiccups are constant and annoying. It's so bad, in fact, that the game will lock up at the end of level 3, and you can't progress no matter what. What a quality game. I know it's another cheap indie game, but how could I not put The War of the End of the Days on this list? This game was part of my early reviews on this channel, and it's a special kind of awful. I mean, look at this game. It looks more unfinished than Bubsy 3D. Everything is just off in this game. The shooting only works when you're in a specific range of an enemy. The enemies themselves lack in variety and sometimes hit you with pinpoint accuracy or miss entirely. The level design is really bad, buildings and other random objects are just placed about with no thought, and the worst part of this game, the sound. The music for the first level is annoying as hell, but stuck in my brain for all eternity. The sound effects for shooting enemies is like 5 times louder than the original audio. Level 3 has a siren blaring through the entire stage. It's just a mess. It's bad, but it's a special kind of bad to me. Coming out the same year as Doom, but using the engine for Wolfenstein 3D, we have Isle of the Dead. Yeah, so why even play this game when a much better, more advanced FPS came around at the same time? I don't know. This game is just a knockoff of Wolfenstein. The fucking box art has that as a quote. I'm not kidding. There's very little, if any, instructions on what the hell you're supposed to be doing, so you're just walking around like a moron until you find literally anything. There's a lot of other cryptic things like putting oil on a rifle before using it or it'll blow up in your face and you'll die. Speaking of dying, the game is really hard. Enemies respawn after leaving each area and they do a ton of damage. Not to mention the kill you in one-hit events. My favorite. You're better off playing Super Noah's Ark 3D, in all honesty. Man, it took this long to put an LJN game on the list. I'm surprised. Friday the 13th on the NES was actually developed by Atlas and just published by LJN. But, you know, that rainbow logo means you're in for some jank gameplay. This game is both frustrating and confusing. Navigation is a pain because there's no clear indication on which way you're going. You have a map, but it's not at all helpful and only adds to the confusion. See, in this game you need to protect children in cabins before they get killed by Jason. Which, if you know anything about the movies, Jason doesn't kill kids. He's also not afraid of water, but I digress. But Jason himself is an overpowered fucker and can kill you in a few hits. He'll spawn out of nowhere lightning quick and deal damage faster than you can blink. Fighting enemies is a chore because the default weapon is worthless unless you crouch. You can only find new weapons by jumping around in the air or doing some convoluted puzzle. It's just a mess. I would say just play the newer-ish one for a good Friday the 13th experience, but even that game has a ton of problems that'll never be fixed. What a shame. Bubsy is back again on the list, but this time with his Atari Jaguar game, Bubsy and Fractured Furry Tales. Now the 2 Bubsy games on the SNES are pretty bad, but they look like Super Mario World when you compare it to this game. They basically just took the first Bubsy game and made it exponentially worse. You die in one hit, you move way too fast, the enemy placement is bad and just pop out of the side of the screen, and the lousy hit detection doesn't even help in this case. The level design is bad, even worse than Bubsy 1. Like, the speed that Bubsy moves does not work with this kind of level design. The levels themselves are also way too long, over 10 minutes in some cases. Since you die in one hit, good luck trying to beat any of them. The graphics are poor and the sound effects are annoying. Damn it, Bubsy, why do you have to suck so much ass in every single game that you're in? Ugh, Batman Forever on the SNES. Yuck. This game is created with the Mortal Kombat engine, even though it's not a fighting game, rather it's a side-scrolling beat-em-up. The controls are just so fucking bad. In order to progress through the game, you have to do such weird button combos that you would never think to do, like using your grappling hook to reach higher platforms. You need to press select and up in a specific way or you just end up jumping. And getting down, you need to press down and R in a specific way. Why? Combat isn't much better. Even though it uses the Mortal Kombat engine, you can't even deal a string of combos with basic attacks. It just doesn't work and they have a ton of health. It's just tedious and unfun to play. Oh, and no continues. So if you die, you need to play the entire game all over again. Fuck off, Batman Forever, forever. Okay, so I tried to avoid putting sports games that come out every year on this list because they're easy targets and I just don't play sports games. But WWE 2K20 can't be ignored. How did this game get released in the state that it did? This game was completely unstable at launch with wrestlers glitching all over the place, textures and physics just becoming non-existent, and the whole experience was just a travesty. Luckily it was patched, but a lot of problems still exist. The load times are very long, longer than in previous games. There's still a bunch of weird lighting issues with certain clothes and entrances. The hair is all fucked up and looks worse than Aquaman's GameCube hair. The presentation is also a lot worse. John Cena in this game looks like garbage compared to his 2K15 model. The online mode didn't even work because of the loading issue and bugs. The single player is complete garbage as well. The writing is so poor and cringy and makes Dead Rising 4's script look like Shakespeare. I swear they spent like a week writing this game. Oh, and the game crashes all the damn time, even more than previous games. I finished a 1v1 match and the game crashed. I was in the middle of making a character, crashes. Watching a cutscene, crashes. Watching the intro credits, crashes. To think after 3 months, 2K said fuck it to this game and supported 2K19 instead. At least they learned from their mistakes and 2K21 was a serious improvement. I mean, you can't get much worse than this at least. Alright, I know this one seems like an odd pick, but this game was such a bummer to me as a child. I mean, I don't know what I expected from a game called Beach Party CookOff, but I expected something on the lines of Cooking Mama or something similar. So yeah, the SpongeBob game is all about cooking meals, and it's so boring. I don't know how Nintendo kept cooking fun, and this game couldn't. You know, looking back at this game, it doesn't look like complete trash, and it's probably an okay game. But my younger self can't fuck off, so I'm sticking this on the list just because of that. I had Atlantis Square Pantis on the DS, and that game kicked ass, so I guess I was expecting that as a kid. I don't know why I just put this on the list. It's kind of just like a filler, but I remember this game just bothering me as a kid. It's on the list. Just get it away from me. I'm done. Man, Sonic has a lot of games that just suck, doesn't he? I mean, I don't even put these games on here on purpose. It's just I don't like any of these games. But Sonic R, I kinda like. But even I have to admit that this game is very bad. It's a racing game, but there are only 5 tracks to choose from. All 5 of them have such weird design to them that you'll accidentally end up going backwards on certain tracks the first time through. I think the reason for the odd track design was for the collectibles you can find on each level, which can unlock more characters. The controls suck and sometimes worse depending on the character. Literally, the infamous Tails doll is probably the worst character to play because of this. Super Sonic is incredibly overpowered and will mop the floor in any race. The music is strange for a Sonic game at this time, but it's kind of catchy in a cheesy way. The graphics are okay, but the draw distance on the Sega Saturn version is pretty awful. If you want to try this game out for yourself, play either the GameCube version or the PC version. But be warned though, the controls might cause you to give up. To end off part 3, the Virtual Boy. Just the whole console. This will be the only time I'll put an entire console on the list, just a heads up. So the Virtual Boy was released in 1995, just before the N64 was released for almost $200. And this console only lasted less than a year. I think it was only 7 months. But why? Well, taking a look at the console itself, you could probably see why. It was advertised to be portable, but trying to comfortably play this thing was pretty much impossible. It's just a pair of goggles on a stand, and there's no head strap. The graphics on all the games were only in red and black. The box even claimed that playing for long periods of time could give you headaches or seizures. Yeah, that's good to know. Well, how about the games themselves? Even though this console is called the Virtual Boy, there were only like 2 games that felt like you were in the game, hence the virtual reality aspect of Virtual Boy. But a lot of the games showed off 3D aspects rather than virtual reality. The Virtual Boy does have some good games like Wario Land, Telro Boxer, and Mario Clash, but pretty much all these games you could play on a home console or on a Game Boy and not get a splitting headache. There were only 22 games released on this thing, 14 in North America only. None of these games have been re-released by Nintendo, so the only way you can experience them would be through emulation or buying the console yourself. It's expensive though, so it may not be in your best interest unless you're a collector of really shitty game consoles. But hey, to each their own.